welcome back to my channel. We are very nearly at Halloween, which means that we are almost to the end of spooky season, which is one of my favourite times of years, but then I suppose we've got Christmas to look forward to. So I thought today it was only fitting that we look at a true crime case that took place on Halloween 1974 to be exact. Now this case has been dubbed the Candyman Killer and definitely played into the fear of every single parent when you are taking your child out trick-or-treating that there could possibly be somebody who has put something, poison, razor blades, whatever, into the sweets. We say sweets here in the UK, but I know that I have some American followers, so you guys will say candy, so if I refer to sweets, that's what I'm talking about. So this is the horrifying case of Timothy O'Bryan. Timothy was a normal 8-year-old boy back in 1974 and he lived in Pasadena, Texas. He lived with his mother Daneen, his father Ronald and his sister Elizabeth, and just like most children that age, Halloween comes around and of course they want to go trick-or-treating. So on the 31st of October 1974, Ronald took out Timothy and Elizabeth with a neighbour of theirs and their 2 children to go trick-or-treating in the local neighbourhood. So they come to a house and they knock on the door and the children wait patiently to say trick-or-treat and get their sweets. But there was no answer at this door. Now, kids being kids, they got impatient and they ran ahead to go to the next house. Ronald, for some strange reason, hung behind. Shortly afterwards, Ronald catches up to the others and he is clutching 5 Pixie Sticks sweets. Now, I've never heard of Pixie Sticks before, but they are, you know, like the powdery sweet stuff inside of a straw type container that you just tip into your mouth. Those are those sorts of long sweets. Ronald gives 1 to Timothy, 1 to Elizabeth, 1 to each of the neighbour's 2 children, and then he gives the 5th one to a local boy that the family know from their church. Now the weather wasn't great on this evening, so they decided to cut short the trick-or-treating and went home. Later that evening, Ronald decides to allow the kids to choose 1 sweet before they go to bed. And Timothy chooses his Pixie Stick. Now he really struggles to get into it, so Ronald has to help him to open up the wrapper so that he can pour the contents into his mouth. And when Timothy tastes it, he complains that it tastes bitter. Ronald assures him, no, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, it's normal. Here, have this drink, wash it down. So that's what Timothy does. Now immediately, Timothy is crippled with stomachache. Like this poor boy, remember he's 8 years old, he's in absolute agony with tummy ache. He runs to the bathroom where he starts violently vomiting. Eventually, his vomiting leads to him convulsing. Now you'd think as a parent, this would be terrifying to watch your child who's just eaten a sweet that they've been given by a stranger essentially, and now they're being violently ill. I mean, seeing your child like that must have been horrendous. And Ronald claims that he held the boy while he was being sick and tried to comfort him, and then Timothy's body went limp. An ambulance gets called, but sadly, Timothy dies on the way to the hospital, less than an hour after he had eaten that sweet. Now, obviously, the local community is in a state of panic when they hear what's happened to Timothy. Parents are panicking, you know, has somebody put something in these sweets? Is this going to happen to their children? So they're frantically going around making sure that none of the children are eating anything that they got given on that night. It was Timothy's autopsy that revealed that the Pixie Stick had been laced with potassium cyanide, and it was that had caused Timothy's death. Luckily, Elizabeth and the neighbour's 2 children hadn't eaten their Pixie Stick yet, so the police were able to grab hold of those and take them in for testing. When the police went to the house of the 5th child, the boy from the church, their parents dashed upstairs to check on the boy, and they found him lying fast asleep on the bed, clutching hold of this sweet. Now, thank goodness for this boy, because he just like Timothy, hadn't been able to get into the container to eat the sweet, because that's what he was planning to do. He was planning on having it before he went to bed. So luckily for that boy, he hadn't ingested anything. Now, when these sweets were taken to be tested, it was found that the top 2 inches had been filled with the potassium cyanide powder. So somebody had opened the sweet, tipped it in, and then stapled the top back together. See, there was enough cyanide in these sweets, in each one of these sweets, to kill between 2 and 3 grown adults. So these poor kids would not have stood a chance. So the police begin to interview people, trying to find out what's happened and who had given out these poison-laced sweets. And when they come to interview Ronald, they very, very quickly become suspicious. Now, up until this point, nobody had believed that Ronald could be a suspect. Nobody would want to think that a father would give their own child a poisoned sweet. But things didn't add up. Ronald claimed that he couldn't remember where he'd got these sweets, despite the fact that he'd hung behind and the occupant of the house had come out and given him these, which, when you're going trick-or-treating, would be an event that would stand out, you would think. Now, something else that baffled the police was it was strange to them that he couldn't remember which house had given these sweets, because the party had only gone to 2 streets to do trick-or-treating, because it had been raining that evening and they decided to go home early. Now, 2 streets worth is not an awful lot. The police obviously went to every house in these 2 streets, and they realised that none of these houses had given out these pixie sticks sweets as their treats. So where had Ronald got them from? Eventually, Ronald claims that he can remember which house it is. This is after walking around the streets 3 times with police. He finally, something finally triggers in his mind and he knows which house it is. And they go to this house that belongs to a gentleman named Courtney Melvin. Now, Ronald claims that he went back to the house, he knocked on the door for a second time after it wasn't answered when the children had knocked, and the door had creaked open a little, there were no lights on inside, and an arm, a hairy arm at that, had reached round and given him the 5 pixie sticks. However, Courtney Melvin was an air traffic controller at the local airport, and on Halloween night he was at work and didn't finish and wasn't home until gone 11 o'clock at night. Now, this guy had an airport full of people that could corroborate his alibi, so he was very quickly ruled out as a suspect. So this begs the question, why would Ronald lie? When police dug a little deeper into Ronald, they found that he was over $100,000 in debt. They also discovered that in January that year, Ronald had taken out insurance policies on both of his children worth $10,000 each. And then again, just 1 month before Timothy's death, Ronald had taken out an additional 2 policies on the children worth $20,000 each. So here he is, he's got about $60,000 worth of insurance policies on his children's lives. This is a man who is in a huge amount of debt. His car was about to be repossessed, the house had been foreclosed on, and suddenly he's taking out insurance policies on his children. Interestingly enough, his wife, Daneen, the children's mother, had no idea that these insurance policies had been taken out, which begs the question, why? What purpose would you have to secretly take out insurance policies on your own children? And even more sinister, on the morning of Timothy's death, so on that Halloween morning, Ronald had called the insurance company to see how he would go about putting in a claim should something happen to the children. Police also discovered that Ronald had, very shortly before Halloween, gone to visit a chemical supply shop in Houston. Although he didn't actually purchase anything, he was looking at the cyanide. So by this point, it's pretty obvious that this wasn't some deranged stranger who was out to get random kids, that the person responsible for Timothy's horrific death was in fact his own father. On November the 5th, 1974, just days after Timothy's death, Ronald is arrested and he is indicted on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. He pleads not guilty and goes to trial. His trial begins on May the 5th, 1975. Now, the witnesses that the prosecution was able to bring forward gave damning evidence against Ronald. They brought in a chemist who claimed to have had a conversation with Ronald about how much cyanide it would take to kill somebody. They brought in a chemical supply salesman who claims again to have had a conversation with Ronald where he asked where he would buy cyanide from. Work colleagues testified that he seemed to be obsessed with the idea of poisoning someone. He was constantly talking about cyanide, about the properties of cyanide, about how much you need to use and where to get it from. And even his own family said that after Timothy had died, Ronald was talking about how he was going to spend the insurance money, how he was going to take a long vacation and he was going to do this, that and the other, which as a parent myself, there's no way that you would be thinking about going on a holiday. Your child has just been killed by someone. Unsurprisingly, on June 3rd, 1975, the jury took just 46 minutes to find Ronald guilty on all counts. They took a further 71 minutes to sentence him to death. His execution was planned and then it kept being pushed back. He kept having appeal after appeal. At one point, his execution was planned for the 31st of October, 8 years after Timothy had died. But eventually, on March 31st, 1984, Ronald O'Bryan was executed by lethal injection. This man had killed his own child, attempted to kill his other child, and to try and disguise the fact that it was him, had attempted to kill his neighbour's children and then some random kid that he didn't even know very well. All so that he could collect on money. That is just so shocking to me. It's so disgusting. All the way through, Ronald was claiming that he was innocent, that it wasn't him that had done it, despite the fact that all of the evidence clearly pointed to the fact that it was him. His final words are just infuriating. He said, among other things, "I forgive all, and I do mean all, those who have been involved in my death." I mean, this guy, he signed his own death warrant when he decided that he was going to kill his kids to get some money. He's got nobody else to blame for this but himself. If you have enjoyed this video, please do hit the subscribe button, drop me a like, leave any comments down below, let me know what you think about this case. I could rant all day about how disgusting this man is, but I won't. Thank you so much again for watching, guys, and I will see you all very soon.